Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's March 11th, 2020. I'm in the work area, and recently I posted a video talking about protecting our blueberry plants with electrical conduit, hoops that we created, and netting, keeping the birds out from eating all of our blueberries, and protecting it from white-tailed deer and the cottontail rabbits as well. And in that video I went into pretty much detail on how we use that protective mechanism. But after posting that video, Jeff Dinter commented and asked, what am I doing wrong with my blueberry? My blueberry bush is probably 4 to 5 years old, however it is not producing a lot of blueberries. If I'm lucky, a small handful of blueberries. And in a 4 to 5 year old plant, that's really, something's wrong there. So I've talked before about the forms of capital that I invest in. And when we think about capital investment, people will think about their property, they'll think about their portfolio, diversified financial portfolios and all. That's only one of 8 to 10 different forms of capital that I invest in. So one is intellectual capital, that's our book learning, our research, all of that, and using really well-referenced resources. The other one is experiential capital. In other words, nothing is as valuable as you getting out there after doing the research, applying that knowledge base that you've learned through book reading and research, applying it and realizing that you're going to make mistakes and being honest enough with yourself to accept that you made a mistake and doing further research and discovering what actually went wrong. So intellectual capital and experiential capital, those are the two key fundamentals. The other thing I would say is I like to go to first principles thinking. In other words, yes, analogies do work. Our neighbor or our cousin or somebody you saw on YouTube planted these plants or this raised garden bed, and they had bountiful crops. Everything worked out fantastic within just a couple of years. And just because someone else did those things and you pick up a similar variety and do what you think they did, it may not be as successful, because we have to go to the first principles. We have to understand the building blocks, going to the most fundamental truths. So like if we want to write a book or a screenplay, then we start off with understanding the alphabet, then putting words together, then building sentences, then paragraphs, then putting in context, creating a story, and so on. And it's the same thing when we're talking about growing various different plants. So there's the intrinsic characteristics, there's the products that come from a plant, and then there's the needs of the plant as well. And so balancing those first principles, those fundamental building blocks, understanding what they are, and integrating all of those into some trials, in other words, getting some experiential investing experientially, developing a skill, and realizing not everything's going to work out ideally the first time. So when it comes to any plant, I say do the research first. So select the appropriate variety, select the appropriate location, prepare the site, planting the site, care and maintenance, and then protecting the plant as well. So those are the things that I'm going to go over some of those today. It'll probably be too long since I'm so wordy with everything. So the first thing is the variety selection. So there's based on zone hardiness. So some plants and some blueberry plants really tolerate the cold temperatures very, very well. However, in southern locations, those cold tolerant plants won't do nearly as well. And vice versa, those warm tolerant plants won't be able to withstand the very cold winters if you're up north as well. So zone hardiness is really important. What about the ripening season? So if you have late frost, you may not want to have one that goes to flower and starts opening up their buds, and the flowers are out before all of the pollinators are out, or before the final freeze. So those are things to think about as well. What about the plant characteristics? The height, the shape, the plant vigor, how vigorous the plant is, how hardy it is, and whether it's upright plant or a spreading plant. So fitting it into your geographic and climate situation, your needs, and when you want to harvest the fruit from it, when you're going to be available. Some people travel at different times of the year, so they want the fruit to bear fruit at a certain time so they can get out and get the nets on it on top of before the birds get to it and harvest all the fruit. I created a small table that I think I got from one of the universities, maybe the University of Maine, and then I modified it some as I learned about the various blueberry plants that we grow here. But like, for example, a couple of the blueberry plants that we grow here, now I'm in Oswego, New York, that we're near Lake Ontario. We're in Zone 5A, so the Patriot, it's a moderate height. It's very upright plant. It really doesn't bush out too far. It's medium to large size, as I've talked about before. It gives you nice, firm, excellent quality blueberries, and they're about early to mid-season. We have Northland. These are very much more spreading. They're fairly upright as well, but they're about a medium-sized plant. The quality of the fruit, it's a little bit softer than the Patriot plant, blueberry. There are high yields on this, and this is a pretty early producing berry. The blue crop, now these are large, firm, excellent quality, really good tasting blueberries. They're full size, upright. They're mid-season production as well. So on our property we have I think 5 different varieties where I can time them for different times in the season, and that's beneficial for pest pressure, for if we have a late frost, if we have an early frost, if we have a terrible windstorm or hailstorm. So I try to spread out the diversity of the varieties to meet flowering, pollination for the bees, the insects around here, as well as being producing berries at different times, because it means a lot of work doing all the processing if you have all one variety that produces at one time. And I know this isn't just answering your quick question, but I just wanted to put this information out there. And there's tables and lists, so it's finding out from maybe the extension service that you are located in which blueberry varieties they think are hardy to your zone. So that's the first thing, is selecting the variety of the blueberry plant or other plants for your area, and for the beneficial aspects of the plant as well. So site selection, blueberry plants really do need careful consideration to the site that you're going to be putting them on. So they need really well-drained soil. They need full sun. Now, will they grow in the woods? Yes, I have beautiful blueberry plants that grow in the woods, but the fruit is minimal and they become very leggy, very, very tall blueberry plants. And you can take those ones who have been in a shaded area and transplant them into a sunny area, as I have done, and with subsequent regular pruning, you can convert them back into being more of a berry producing and get it under control. But it requires more effort if you do that, and not having full sun is detrimental. You really want to have 3/4 of the day the sun being exposed. So you need to select that part on your property that's appropriate, that you're going to get the sun and well-drained soil. You need to have water available. Yes, these plants tolerate being in wet areas during the fall, late fall, winter, very early spring. But once they start developing and start leafing out and start producing the buds and developing the buds and ultimately the berries, they're going to need regular watering, but not saturated. Those roots need air. Raised beds or containers are good for blueberries, as long as you're monitoring them. And I'm not going to get into the maintenance in this video. Site protection. So as I've talked about in previous videos, on this site we live in a high wind zone. where to the west of us, the property really is a downslope area. So the winds whip across a couple thousand feet and hit our property pretty harshly. And so we're building hedgerows and living fences. Now I have some fences up in the area where the next set of blueberries will be, but living fences are going there. Now, if you're in this area and you're having more of a traditional lawn area, you may want to be putting evergreens all along that western wall where the high winter winds come through, because even those very immature buds that overwinter, once they get frozen, they're done with. So they're not going to be as productive. What else? Oh, don't use balsam fir plants, and the reason that is, and I haven't had this experience, but they will harbor some of the diseases that blueberries get. So if you're managing diseases in your blueberry plants, and then again it's being maintained in a hedgerow near where the blueberry plants are, that can easily get transmitted, especially if it's the wind side where those balsam fir plants are planted. So that's it as far as the site selection goes. How about soil preparation? If you don't feel comfortable with microscopy and don't know as much about the soil microbiome, things that I've talked about extensively here on site in videos. I'm sorry, I got to adjust my seat. Then I'd say get soil tests. Go to your local extension. When you fill out the paperwork, make sure you check the box or write on it that this is a site that you want the soil to be analyzed for the purpose of having blueberry plants there in the future. Because there's certain minerals that the blueberry plants will benefit from to be more productive and have more vigor, be healthier. And certainly the pH is absolutely essential. And that's probably the most common fault with the soil that someone can have. So we want to have not compacted soil. You don't want to have clay soil. The roots of a blueberry plants are less than a foot in depth, basically, as far as where they're doing all their work. They're just below the surface of the soil, just in the top few inches. So if you think about it, if you're sticking a blueberry plant in the middle of a lawn, and the grass is right up next to it, that grass, the roots of that grass are going to compete heavily with the blueberry plant itself. And plantain, all of these, and dandelions, all of these weeds and grass covers our lawns are going to compete. So site preparation beforehand is really important for dealing with the soil and getting it ideal for the blueberry plants in the future. Let me look at some of my notes I wrote down here. Require well-drained soil. Now, so one of the things I would say is right now, this time of year, we just had a lot of rain yesterday. The snow is melting like crazy around here. So after a rainfall, go on out and see those low spots. You certainly don't want to plant your blueberry plants in any places where you see the waters being retained for 24 hours or 48 hours. That ground is going to be too wet. You want to have a sandy, loamy soil as best drainage. It can have large pebbles. It can be gravel. Our property's all gravel here, so that's okay. That tends to be more acidic soil as well. We want a soil with a relatively low pH, 4.8 or 4.5. Some people will say all the way down to 4.5 to 5.5. I'd say 4.8 to 5.2, so right around 5. You can pick up these soil test kits in your plant store or box store. You can pick up some of these moisture and pH tests, on Amazon and all that. If you're sending your soil off to be analyzed, they'll be, as long as you follow their instructions for gathering and processing the soil, that will work out just fine. And because I take this so seriously, what we do here, I spent a few more bucks. I think these are like 90 bucks, and there'll be a link in the description below, or 80 bucks. This is a Kelway direct reading soil acidity test for home and garden use. This thing is pretty accurate. It's accurate and precise. So when I compare it to more expensive means, it shows accuracy. It's going to be right on target with those. And it's precise. I get the repeated measurements in the same sample. As long as I follow the instructions and keep the tip clean, all of those things. So this is one of the things. I'll have this in the description below. I really don't think that these other systems that you pick up are something that you can rely on if you're investing in plants. That may not be the best investment. That's been my experience anyways. So all right, so yeah, no heavy soils like clay. You want to have sandy, loamy soil. Avoid compaction. So if it's area where you've been running a riding mower or a tractor on the site over and over again, you want to prep that site beforehand. And and I'd say lots of organic material needs to go in it. Let's say you've got some really nice sandy soil on your site. You really want to increase lots of organic material into that, like we have here. We do lots of compost. Now, compost is an excellent organic material for many places on the site, but ours isn't acidic enough. So when we get done composting, it's great for all our garden vegetables. It's really good. I can adjust it so it has a higher fungal, more fungally dominated compost, so that can go into the food forest where we use more a balanced bacterial versus fungal dominated compost finished product that we use in our gardens. So, and I haven't really gotten the ideal mix yet for getting it set for blueberries, where the compost is acidic and it has the appropriate microbial communities. That's something I'm still working on. I have more work to do. So that's where I am at this point here. If you do use peat moss as a soil amendment, make sure you add water to the peat moss before integrating it, mixing it in with your soil. And you want to mix it about 1-to-1, so the soil that you dig out of the place where you're going to put the plant in the ground, you want to dig it out large enough. The saying is, for a 1 gallon plant, you want to dig a 5-gallon hole. So you really want to dig out an appropriate amount of the soil, remove any root systems that you see there from any tenacious plants like quackgrass and so on. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. But mix it 50-50 with whatever the organic soil amendment that's going to have the appropriate pH of the soil for it. When you're planting the plant, again, you want to make the hole really good size for each plant that you're putting in. I won't go over all the spacing and row dimensions, distances in this video, but when we're planting the plants, the thing that I recommend the most is, first thing you want to do is get rid of the competition and any noxious weeds that are in the area. So the season before, maybe you want to tarp the areas where you're going to be planting the plants. First, make sure you've selected the ideal place. If it's a low spot, you got to bring in fill. You got to create mounds. So growing into mounded areas is absolutely fine, and get that all established beforehand. If your soil has a pH of 7 or higher than that, then you want to add some acidifying agent to the soil as well, like a sulfur product, the season before, and then tarp the area to do occultation. You want to kill the weeds. You can do solarization as well, but you want to kill out the competition if at all possible. Many people will say go ahead and rototill the area, turn it multiple times. What I've seen is if there is a noxious weed that has a like bindweed or quackgrass or Bermuda grass that has these long white spaghetti looking side weeds that go out and shoot up a new plant in the distance, every time you run the rototiller there, you're just reproducing more and more of the same plants. So using some technique to go ahead and get rid of the competition, the weeds and the grass that's there. Because remember, those blueberry plants have relatively shallow roots, and that's really important. So you've got, once you've gone ahead, you made sure that the site is the appropriate location on your property, full sun, you've got good soil there, it's not in a sunken area. If it was in a sunken area, you've addressed that, you've taken care of the weeds. And I don't recommend using various types of herbicides to get rid of the weeds. That's not what I would recommend. And you've got let's say you've tarped the area, everything's looking good, it's the next spring, and the springtime is probably the best time to do your transplants, to pick up your plants. You can pick them up as a potted plant from your local nursery or from your Tractor Supply or Lowe's or wherever you want to get it from. I'd do some research, make sure you got the right variety, know where the plants came from. If you're up north like here, did they come from down south? Do they already have the flowers on them? Are they already getting ready to produce berries and all? I'd say stay away from those ones. You want to have dormant plants that you're going to be putting in early in the springtime. So you've uncovered your weed mats, you've dug your hole. It's okay to use either a potted plant or a bare root plant. I like the bare root plants a lot, and I know that there aren't any hitchhikers in amongst the roots of those plants. And dig your hole big enough, amend your soil, get the appropriate organic material mixed in with it. And then let's say it's a potted plant, sometimes there'll be look and see where the actual crown of the plant actually is. Sometimes there will be mulchy material on the surface of it, and they've actually buried some of the stem. You want to get down to where they really came from when they dug them out of the nursery, or hopefully, or did they add more mulch on top of it to keep it moist for a prolonged period in the nursery that you're at, that you picked it up from. So sometimes the roots have worked their ways up some. You got to peel the roots down some so that they don't get exposed to the air and dry out the plant, requiring more water. The other thing is you may want to gently loosen up the roots if they've been somewhat root bound, or they've all been in a tubular shape. So that's why I like the bare root plants more. You can separate them out and get them oriented appropriately. And then you want to put the plant in where that root crown actually is right at the surface level of the ground that you've got. Pack it down pretty darn well, make sure all the air is out of the area, water it down really well. I think it's nice to have a nice berm around. That isn't meaning that the plant is sunken, but it would appear that it's sunken, so during the watering times it's retaining some of that water for the plant within a little ring, a little berm around the plant, so that it directs that water so it doesn't run off, especially if you have a mounded area, and run off down to the sides. And so many of those plants that are really surface oriented aren't getting the moisture that they need, stressing the plant out even more. I think I've covered the main things. So what else? Mulching the plant is really important. Having good water access, using, I think, a drip line is really potential. If you're using a sprinkler system, time your sprinkler system so that you're not stressing the plant out, getting water on the flowers when the bees are getting there and all. Rain will do enough of the natural stuff. But I think use less water by using a drip irrigation system. Using good mulch helps to keep the soil somewhat moist so that the water doesn't evaporate as quickly. It provides good cover for all the microorganisms and the macroorganisms to move around underneath the area. I like using weed mats in our places because of some of the invasive grasses that we've got here and some of the weeds that we've got here as well. So I like the drip irrigation, but there are soaker hoses, there's overhead watering systems as well. Drip irrigation works the best for me here. Certainly we've used wood chips in multiple locations. Don't mix the wood chips in with the soil. Don't use that. Don't mix sawdust in with the soil. If you are going to use those materials, bark mulch may be better, but it's got to be aged or really aged wood chips, several years old. Where they've broken down. Otherwise, there's as the microorganisms break down these highly carbonaceous materials, nitrogen, the nitrogen that's so necessary for the plants, the blueberry plants, may not be as available. And they can be heavy feeders if they're really producing very well. And we want to use, if you're going to use a fertilizer, you want to use like a 10-10-10 fertilizer. The fertilizer that I picked up, and this is the only fertilizer we use on our site, is Hallie Tone, and it's for azaleas and rhododendrons, the other soil-loving ones, and I just followed the instructions. I may make a follow-up video on the next phase is protecting the plants and pruning the plants. Oh, that's one more thing. So when the root structure of any plant is so important, and probably one of the most important times is when we're planting the plant in the soil or we're transplanting the plant. We really want those roots to remain in the most optimal condition where we're not disturbing the roots. We want to have the microbes that have already gotten established, intimately associated with those roots, to stay with those roots. And we want to make sure that those roots have the ability to reproduce, to grow and develop further. Because in order for that plant to do well, we want the roots really to do extremely well. So pruning is very, very important at this point. So once you've got your blueberry plant in the ground, you want to do minimal pruning because we've selected a dormant blueberry plant. There's no flowers, no leaves out on the plant. You're getting it in a full state of dormancy, and therefore the nutrients and the reserves that are in the plant can be charged to help develop the root system more extensively. So whenever we prune a plant during dormancy, we stimulate vigorous vegetative growth, meaning they're going to grow more leaves, more stems and all. So we don't want to do that. So if we got damaged limbs, yes, remove the damaged and diseased limbs. If we have limbs that are really right down to the ground level and going to be a problem, I'll talk about another situation in the future about that, but for the most part, that's a limb that you want to remove. So those ones that are damaged, broken, diseased, or in a dysfunctional place, like going right down to the ground, you're not going to get berries off of that in the future. Those are the ones you want to prune. But don't prune too heavy. There are plants that we want to prune when we stick them in the ground, but the blueberry plant isn't one of them. We need those lateral roots to really extend out on these blueberry plants so that they can support the plant in the future. The next thing is, when that plant starts to develop and you start seeing little flowers developing on them, rub them off. Because those flowers are going to take energy from the root system and start to develop into fruit. We want all of the energy from the photosynthesis, all of the work that's going on by that plant to go into establishing really good foundation for that plant to do well in the future. So I think I actually wrote some notes here. I think I've covered just about everything I wanted to go over. I'll probably make another video at some point in the future about pruning the blueberry plants and about maintaining and protecting. I've already talked a bit about that with that last video with the electric conduit and the netting as well. So I think I've covered everything fairly well with this. By all means, do the research. The two big investments are your intellectual capital and your experiential capital. Don't be afraid to get out there. Realize you're going to fail. If you're really going to be an exceptional person at something, realize that there's a lot of failures, a lot of missteps that you're going to go through. Don't give up. Go back to first principles thinking, finding out what are the main elements, what are the most fundamental building blocks that we need to go from. So with that, I think I'll end this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. If you think this video was of value, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. Trying to grow the channel, so whatever you can do to help out with that, really appreciate it. And there'll be an Amazon affiliate link for this in the description below.